Hello. This week we're looking at something very simple, and I assume a lot of people will know exactly what one of these is. No silly answers. This is a pap boat. Not the most inspiring name for an object in the world, but they are used to feed people, either very, very young people, although I'm dubious about this. Anyone that's had a young child will wonder about the possibility of holding it still enough to tip a sort of loose porridge down its mouth. It's more likely to be for invalids, for very unwell people, or for the elderly. And you would mix a small amount of whatever, a sort of pottage or pap in there, and you would gently lift it up to them, and they'll be able to take that in. They're made in a variety of materials. I've seen carved wooden examples. You get ceramic examples in pottery and porcelain, rarely in porcelain, and you get them in silver. The silver ones, the earliest ones, tend to be of this form, which is a very simple bowl with this elongated drawn lip. Latterly, towards the end of the 18th century, they become boat-shaped. This curved section here begins to point out in the other direction, and the lip here, which is just simple edge here, it actually, the silversmith lifts it up and flares it out, so you start to get a border from about here onwards in a flange coming out, often with a more pronounced section here, so you can engrave initials or a crest on it. And latterly, in the Regency period, this area, as well as it comes out, it can have cast foliate borders on it and be quite swanky indeed. And then they seem to fall out of, after about 1830, 1840, they seem to disappear. So it's a very arcane form. Lots of these get repurposed, as some of you will know when you've bought them. When they've been redundant in families, they put 3 little legs on them and a handle and turn them into a little cream boat or sauce boat. So a lot of these have gone by the wayside, shall we say, because they're no longer useful. They weren't useful 150 years ago. But this has everything. This is why I bought this. This has everything a good piece of silver should have, and should not be overlooked, because it's this very simple domestic form. The first thing to say about it is it's hallmarked, and it's got nice hallmarks on it. They are slightly not worn, but slightly misstruck, because on all pap boats, particularly the early ones, they're marked on the curve. And again, it's that thing of striking a flat punch on a curved surface. You're only going to, depending which side you favour, you're only going to get a sort of partial impression of that mark, unless you hit it so hard it deforms the bowl, which of course would be self-defeating, because then the silversmith has to have it back and hammer that mark out, and it becomes virtually invisible. So there's a bit of skill involved in marking these things. This one, nice and clearly marked. The very earliest ones tend to be marked on the back here, and some, particularly provincial ones, or American examples that I've seen, will be marked either on the base of the bowl, or more commonly, it's an unusual feature, on the inside of the bowl here. And certainly if you see one with just a maker's mark, that could be an interesting provincial example. This is by Robert Innis, London 1744, and it falls into that, what I call that golden period of English silver, which is about 1700 to 1750, where things just tend to be beautifully handmade. It's just before wide-scale mechanisation comes in. It's just before the rolling of sheet silver allows people like Hester Bateman to start churning objects out, literally churning them out of the workshop and putting less handwork into them. This, made by Innis, even though it looks dead simple, dead plain, this will have been hammered out of a single small piece of silver. So again, the reason it's so tactile, the reason this spout comes out so beautifully, and look at the proportion of that, is it's taken someone a very long time, a silversmith, hammering away to move this silver to make this form. And it's made, not that you can tell by looking, it's thicker, much thicker at the bottom. He's left a lot of weight there to steady it, to stabilise it. And then as he's hammered it out, this edge has become thinner and thinner. But then this lip here, all the way around here, he's just brought it back again slightly, because if you know, if you're carrying a liquid in a bowl or a cup, if that edge is either straight or flares out slightly, the liquid tends to fall out. If it just curves in very slightly, it tends to keep it. And the man that made this, he understood that. He also understood how to make the most beautiful drawn lip. That's, if you had a potter with wet clay using his thumb, he couldn't have drawn that out any better than a silversmith using hundreds and hundreds of meticulous hammer blows to achieve the same effect. So this is part of the delight of silver. You're looking at something which ostensibly you might walk past and think, that's nothing, little bowl with the lip, no great shakes there. And certainly were it made 100 years later out of sheet silver and put in a block and pressed and stamped out and cast borders applied, maybe it wouldn't be. But this has been meticulously considered and hammered out. And those hammer marks, whilst you can see there's a softness to it. This is another thing about this. It's a lovely colour of silver. It's had no repairs. It's had no damage. It's had no erasures. So this skin, which has been on it, this surface, which has survived with just gentle handling and cleaning for 280 years, has got this lovely soft tone to it, which is probably less evident because I've just cleaned it. But if I sort of breathe into it, it probably doesn't help at all. But it's got a lovely grey colour. It would be difficult to make this look like this with a modern piece of silver, even if you made it by hand. The other thing that appeals enormously to me on anything is it has a period crest. In this case, a stork coming out of a basket on that little tide. Sorry, you get the horrible reflections of me. It's like getting me in stereo, but you get the lovely crest on the side. Sometimes the crest will be on the back. And as I say, on later ones, you'll have a border here, an inverted rim with a border, and you might have a crest there. But it was a swanky thing when it was made. It was made for a noble family, member of a noble family. It falls into the golden period of hand-raised but very accomplished British silver, 1700 to 1750, when we've undergone a Huguenot influence and we've basically had to raise our game up a little bit to meet a lot of French immigrants that were much more highly skilled than our native and domestic goldsmiths. It's beautifully marked. It's everything a bit of silver should be. And it doesn't break the bank. It is worth at best a few £100, which is not an insubstantial amount of money by any means. But when you think of, large things by Paul Storr that are, 50, 80, 100, 150,000 pounds, and what you get for them, for that money, may be impressive. It's possibly not as personal and as tactile and actually as rewarding as something as this, which is personal and hand wrought, and you can feel the person that made it in it. If that makes sense, probably it doesn't. But I thought I'd just show you that this week. It's just a little thing, and it's a note that when you're out collecting or looking for things, they don't have to be white whales, they don't have to be enormous rarities. This was made in London. It was made by Innis, who was a good but workmanlike maker. And it's only a pap boat, but it's in lovely condition. It had everything about it that you would wish. The nice marks, the crest, the lovely colour. And it's from what I consider personally to be that sort of best golden period of British silversmithing, though I'm sure many will disagree. Anyway, that's enough for this week. Just a little pap boat. Hope you've enjoyed seeing it. So until next week, goodbye and good antiques hunting.